Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Within Warzone right now, we've obviously seen a couple of new meta updates go live recently that changed around some of the fastest killing options in the game, the weapons with the best TTK. And oftentimes these type of weapons are maybe a little bit more obscure. Sure, there's your normal meta weapons that have fast TTKs, they're consistent, they're reliable, but the weapons that are sort of the outliers, the absolute fastest TTK options, are usually there because they have a super high skill gap, or they're maybe way more difficult to use than a standard main meta weapon would be. And so today I wanted to break down the new top 5 best TTK options in the game, starting with one that's sort of been around for a little bit now, but it's still an absolute beast, and that is the semi-auto version of the TAQ-V. Now the base full auto TAQ-V is all right, but when you kick this thing into semi-auto, it goes absolutely crazy. All the TTK stats today are stemming from true game data, so it's been verified. It's from the most trusted source we have in the community. A 641 millisecond TTK at 35 meters. So like prime mid-range, if you're running and gunning on Resurgence, this is going to be phenomenal. The thing is though, being that it's semi-auto, you have to be able to consistently spam fast and land shots on enemy targets, which a lot of players can't always do. It's either they're going to, not be able to keep up the fire rate where it's nice and fast and spammy, or they can't consistently track players that are moving while spamming fast. So it's a high skill gap weapon, and that's why its TTK is so busted here. Not to mention it's an MW2 weapon, so its overall feel and its attachment selection is a little bit clunky, which is always unfortunate here. However, if you're looking for the go-to setup here, this is what I've tested around a little bit, and I actually really like the feel of this. So glassless optic I think is great for all those mid-range based fights, primarily where you want to be fighting with this thing, and it offers better firing aim stability, which is nice on a semi-auto gun, and it's of course a clean little blue dot reticle. I also go for the 50 round extended mag. You want to spray and pray with this thing. You don't want to have to worry about running out of ammo, so you got plenty of bullets there to just absolutely lay into enemies and drop them one after another after another. High grain ammo in here, it is going to hurt the control a little bit, but we want to up that velocity. This velo is not all that crazy, so if we can get that value up for that better hit scan range, the weapon's just going to inherently feel better, plus better damage range as well, making that TTK even more efficient at a further distance. I also go for the Bruin Pivot Vertical Grip. Why is that? Well, minimal cons to your ADS and sprint to fire. This weapon's already pretty slow. Better vertical control and a little bit better gun kick as well. Horizontal con there, not a huge deal in semi-auto, but I found that the pros versus the cons on this particular underbarrel were really good for what this weapon is, which is noticeably more difficult and annoying to use when you are spamming it. And then lastly, Bore 490 compensators seem good. It goes all in on horizontal and vertical control alongside some gun kick. That said, Leveler would be decent here, Tempest GH50 would be decent, TIE LR8. A lot of these MW2 compensators would actually be very viable in this situation, especially if maybe you're someone who's toggling between full auto and semi-auto here. That'd be viable too. But yeah, this thing is difficult to use, kind of an awkward weapon, but if you can land shots consistently, not very many things are going to be able to compete with it. Next up here, we've got the Core 45 with the lightning trigger. Now, the Core 45 is a really solid pistol across the board. If you're using the aftermarket part conversion kit, it's got a very quick TTK there. If you are using the lightning trigger though, this thing's fire rate goes absolutely nuts. And when you are spamming this as fast as you possibly can, again, higher skill gap, you got to be able to stay on your opponents and stay consistent with your aim. This thing's going to knock players crazy fast as well. A 449 millisecond TTK at 8 meters. Now, keep in mind, this is a pistol. You're not going to be using it beyond that 10 meter mark, right? You're going to be focusing on close range, and that's about it. And if you can consistently fire this thing fast, that close range is going to be a breeze. You're going to outgun SMGs, shotties, aggressive rifles, pretty much everything in that range. Again, the skill gap here, though, with that semi-auto fire rate needing to be fast, means that some players just naturally won't be as good. If you're a keyboard and mouse player, you can obviously switch things around and maybe make things more convenient for yourself there, but lightning trigger is going to be the main part of this setup that makes this TTK go absolutely nuts. A 78% increase is pretty wild. I also go for the 40 round extended mag. When you are firing as fast as you can, of course, you want to make sure you don't run out of ammo mid-fight. I found myself to be way more accurate when using this when I did throw on an optics, so Slate for me was my go-to there. If there's a different one here that you maybe like a little bit more, feel free to run that instead. I also go for the tactical stock, helps out with some control here. Again, when you're spamming, it's going to be more noticeable, so that's obviously going to make the gun a little bit easier. And then sonic suppressor extends out that lethal damage range, gives you a little bit better velo for that minimal hit scan range there. You just want to make sure that's always consistent, and because we're so close range based here, it's not too difficult to really optimize that. So again, a much higher skill gap option, but one that is so good in the right hands. By the way, as we are breaking down all the weapons and setups here today, if you guys do enjoy the video or if you find it helpful, a like rating is always seriously appreciated. It really does let me know you guys want to see more content like this. And if you are new to the channel or you simply have not subscribed yet, let's change that every single day. This is your one-stop shop for news, updates, patch notes, pretty much everything going on in COD is right here, so feel free to hit that sub button and turn on those post notifications. Next up here, we've got another sidearm. This one though is a super like crazy fast TTK option with an asterisk, because it's all about accuracy and a little bit of RNG factored in, because obviously this is the Akimbo Wasp Stinger pistol. So your TTK can be nuts. It's got a potential TTK 480 milliseconds at about 10 meters because of that hit scan range, right? So 10 meters and within, that's going to melt things up close, and this is much easier to use in close range fights than the Core 45, for example. However, you got to rely on your hip fire actually connecting, and sometimes if you're barrel stuffing and the player is right there, that'll be pretty easy. If they're out to 10 meters, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. You can definitely use these in cheese rotational aim assist as you're constantly moving. You can see the strafe speed here is very fast, and of course the general movement is really good too, as is the sprintifier and everything. So this is a setup entirely based around pushing every single little room or building or enemy team that's in your general proximity, and you want to get as close to them as possible, because if you are spraying and praying at a super close range, these won't lose to many options unless you happen to get some bad RNG and some of the hip fire ends up missing. However, this setup is entirely optimized for hip fire accuracy. So obviously we've got the Akimbo option on there. That's the must have for this setup to break this TTK. 32 round extended mag, that's not much for an individual pistol, but when you got two of them, I mean, you're all good. That's plenty of ammo to spray and pray. I also go for the sidearm L400 laser. This will help out a ton with your hip fire accuracy. Obviously the breacher device S muzzle, which also helps out a little bit with your hip fire accuracy and only hurts your ADS, which is irrelevant here, of course. And then quite frankly, I don't think there's a true best fifth attachment. I went ahead and I've been messing around with high grain just to extend that range out some. If you do happen to miss some shots, and have that range out there might make things a little bit easier, alongside the velocity as well for that overall hit scan feel. But I mean, you could use something like frangible or hollow point on here maybe if you wanted to slow enemies down. The barrels I don't find to be all that great. I mean, you're going to end up getting better control, but that's not super relevant, and that hurts hip fire. Obviously the short compensated hurts hip fire. The light barrel wouldn't, but that's again just focused on range and velo, so like that could be an alternative to high grain if you wanted, but not a huge deal there. Then the stocks, they're decent for flinch resistance and control, but again hurting hip fire and killing your mobility as well, so you don't want to run either of those. So not super practical beyond the 4 attachments. You can mess around and see what feels well for you, whether it's ammo or a barrel, but if you're landing shots at this thing because you have good accuracy, this thing's gonna melt as well. Next up, we got one that I'm sure a lot of people have been waiting to hear talked about, and that is the M13B. This one though is oddly specific as to where it's going to be the most ideal, because this thing's range plummets off a cliff past about your first effective damage range, quite frankly. So when you're building this out, extending that range and velocity is going to be clutch, because its first damage range is crazy. By default, it's around 26, 27, 28 meters, and in that damage range, it's got a 710 millisecond TTK, which is up there with some of the fastest options for run and gun rifles, SMGs, other options like that. It's also incredibly easy to use. Like, I would consider this thing to be pretty low recoil, all things considered, which is nice for an MW2 gun. Like I said though, that range and that velocity is what matters the most. So you really want to pay attention to that effective damage range, hence why I'm running the Echelon barrel. Even though this is more so meant for longer range fights, 50, 60, 70 meters, it's going to extend that range out enough where things are going to be convenient for this fast TTK setup. I also go for the Spirit Fire Suppressor, extends that range out a little bit more as well. However, if you are comfortable with the control, I would actually see a lot of players swapping this and putting on high grain rounds instead. It's going to hurt that control, but give you even better range and even better velocity than Spirit Fire would. So that's a viable choice too. Brewing heavy support on here, it's going to be a little bit slow, but it's obviously going to help out a lot with that control and firing aim stability. You could also run the FTAC angle, the under barrel on here too. 60 round extended mag, you know, this is a fast fire rate rifle. You want to have as much ammo as you possibly can, and then whatever optic you're comfortable with. If you're using this exclusively in like that 30 to 40 meter range where it's going to have that fast TTK, something like a glassless or a slate might be more ideal, but I also think the 2.5 times doesn't zoom in too much, that's unusable there too. So you can definitely mess around and see what works well for you. But yeah, wasn't expecting the M13B to be so good in that like late close range, general mid-range area, but if you build it right, it can be super effective there. Hey everyone, wanted to take a quick second to shout out my friends over at G Fuel. If you were looking to drop into some games energized and focused, look no further than G Fuel. They got you covered for pretty much everything, honestly. They got the hydration formula tubs, the standard energy tubs, they've got the cans, and best of all, if you want to get anything at all from the G Fuel site, you can throw in code IMMORTAL and get a nice little discount at checkout. And who knows, maybe the more the code gets used, the better chance of our shaker cup maybe one day returning. But yeah, if you want to check anything out, the link will be down in the description below. And then lastly, we've got a meta of the past that I don't think many players realize is still as good as this is, the SOA Subverter. Now, this used to be the #1 go-to long-range option, of course. That's not what this is anymore. In fact, this is basically a mid-range beast as it stands. So focusing on, again, that effective damage range, meaning that your close range or mid-range areas are going to be much quicker to kill, means that this thing is actually going to be one of the top options in the game, specifically for TTK. And I think it's also relatively easy to use. Now, it is a little bit slower when it comes to your ADS and everything going on there, your sprint to fire, because it is a battle rifle, but playing in the mid-range, 20, 30, 40 meters, it's going to work just fine for that. And it's got a 774 millisecond TTK at about 35 meters, which is very impressive when you compare that to other mid-range based options, right? So as far as this setup goes here, I am going for the 50 round extended mag, very basic. Everything else pretty much is either about control or extending that lethal damage range. So high grain ammo on here gets that effective damage range out to 26, and then it drops off into its mid-range, which is also really consistent. Plus 978 velo, you're going to have a hit scan range of pretty much any realistic fight you want to be taking with this thing to optimize that TTK. Brewing heavy support on here, again, for that better control, better firing aim stability, idle sway, and whatnot. The Castus brake compensator is really good here, helps sort of minimize that S-curve like pattern and make it a bit more vertical like, so that'll make it a little bit easier to predict. Then lastly, Dozer 90 long barrel, better range, velocity, and control on here too, and a little bit of firing aim stability mixed in there as well. So a little bit slower for something I'd usually like to run in the mid-range, but if you just focus on pre-aiming a little bit more, this thing's gonna drop players crazy fast still, and feel a lot like it was back when it was the #1 go-to meta option. And that being said, those are 5 of the absolute fastest TTK weapons here in Warzone post updates. That's gonna wrap things up. If you enjoyed the video, do me a favor and drop a like on it, and if you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button on your way out to guarantee you're always up to date with everything going on in COD. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.